And when you're a rebuilding team like the Houston Rockets, one of those phases in the rebuild, and I don't know why, but I feel like this is just for almost every team going through a rebuild phase, you struggle on the defensive side of the ball. If you watch the Houston Rockets last season, you just know that they had a very hard time from preventing other teams from scoring the basketball. But I'm here to tell you guys that those days in Houston are over, and I think next season they're actually going to be one of the hardest teams to score on in the NBA. You look at this team, what they've been able to do over last year's NBA draft and this year's NBA draft, bringing in Tari, Eason, bringing in Jabari Smith from the 2022 NBA draft. We look at what they did in this year's NBA draft, bringing in Amin Thompson and also bringing in Cam Whitmore. Both of those guys have identities on the defensive side of the ball, and then they kept the ball rolling in free agency, bringing in Fred VanVleet and also Dillon Brooks, two more guys that have an identity on the defensive side of the ball. So I think with those guys, right, those guys that we just named right there, they all bring something special and unique to the defensive side of the ball, and we're going to be looking at those things today. And before we get into those defensive specialists, I think we're also going to see much improvement from Alpine Seiko on the defensive side of the ball going into next season. So some buzz has been around Alpine Seiko this offseason, and that buzz is coming from him growing an additional 2 inches since he's come into the NBA. Getting measured with his shoes off during the NBA Combine, he was listed at 6'9", and now going into next season, still with no shoes on, he's now 6'11". So we all know that those 2 inches can make a huge difference, especially when you're playing the 5 spot. But I was watching an interview and they were asking Alpine Seiko a bunch of questions, and he seemed really optimistic about his new teammates, his new rookies, and how the Houston Rockets are going to perform next season. He also said that their main goal is getting to the playoffs or getting to the play-in tournament. And then he asked a question about how does he want next season to be individually for him, and he said he wants to get better on both the offensive and the defensive side of the ball. So I think bringing in defensive-minded players and a defensive-minded coach, and Coach Ime Udoka having a defensive-minded coaching staff, I think that's going to motivate Alpine Seiko on the defensive side of the ball. And then you add in those additional 2 inches, I think we could see improvements from him on the defensive side of the ball. So that's another thing for Houston Rockets fans to look forward to going into next season. So I just wanted to talk about that with you guys, and how we can look at these crazy defenders that the Houston Rockets have on one team. I think it's ridiculous. Now I'm going to go ahead and address the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is Dillon Brooks. Now, I've made a lot of videos on the Houston Rockets since the summer has began, and I love reading the comments in the videos because I love talking about basketball. And a lot of you guys feel like Dillon Brooks, he's not as good of a defender that he's made out to be, and I just think that's the whole thing that happened in this past playoffs that's overshadowed him, his ability and his value as an NBA player. And I know what happened was crazy. He was talking crazy to LeBron James, and then he didn't perform up to what he was saying in those press conferences. And then LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, they humbled him. He got humbled by one of the greatest players in NBA history. Now I'm hoping that Dillon Brooks, that he can go into next season learning from that situation, and he could be a little bit more mature on and off the court. But nonetheless, we look at him as a basketball player and we look at him as a defender. He's one of the best in the NBA. And we look at the Memphis Grizzlies, since they've become a playoff team, they've had an identity on the defensive side of the ball, largely due to him and to Jaren Jackson Jr. But we look at Dillon Brooks, we look at his stats. He's not going to pop up and the rebound, a top guy in rebounding or steals and blocks. But if you watch him play, I would say about 85%, 90% of the teams in the NBA, he can take out the opposing team's best perimeter player. He can pick up full court. He has great lateral quickness, and he's strong, so he can guard bigger wings. He can guard smaller guards. Just a very versatile defender. And my favorite part about him is the antics, because I feel like a lot of the time the way he does take guys out of the game is because he also gets into their heads. And I'm a firm believer that on the court, some antics can be positive and some can be negative. We see it with Dillon Brooks, and we also see it with Draymond Green. Sometimes we'll see Draymond Green, he's out there being Draymond, and it gets the crowd into it, it gets his teammates into it. And then other times it might turn out negative. He might get teed up. He might get tossed out of the game. And sometimes he might even get a suspension. So I feel like if Dillon Brooks can find a good balance of just keeping it positive, staying out of trouble with the referees, but also staying in his opponent's head, I think he'll do a pretty good job for the Houston Rockets next season. And I think that's what's so special about the group of defenders that these guys have. So I've already named one player that you can pit on the opposing team's best player. And I feel like the Houston Rockets, they have 3 other guys that you can do that with as well. The other guy I want to talk about is Tari Eason. Now, Tari Eason, he's personally my favorite player on the Houston Rockets. I really enjoyed watching him in last year's Summer League, watching his college highlights, and then also watching him in the NBA last season. And then he also came out this year and made Summer League look pretty easy. But Tari Eason, one of my favorite young players in the NBA, favorite young player on the Houston Rockets, and also a lot of you guys are big on Tari Eason as well. But he's another guy that I feel like one day, and he's still young, just his second year in the league, but I feel like he's going to end up being one of the best defenders in the NBA. He already has a defensive identity. He's created one for himself in college, carried it over into the NBA, but it's just hard for him not to be a great defensive specimen. We look at him, he's 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, and he has some of the biggest hands in his draft class. Now, Tari Eason, he's a man of many tricks on the defensive side of the ball. He has the ability to pick up full court. He's extremely athletic, he's strong, he can jump out the gym, and he's fast, and you can already switch him 1 through 4. And what I love about Tari Eason is that he's a tenacious defender on the ball, but he's also a tenacious defender off the ball as well. He uses his court vision that he has on the offensive side of the ball. He's a very underrated passer, but he uses that court vision to read the opposing team's offense, and he does a great job at jumping the passing lanes, getting steals, leading to easy transition buckets. And also with that wingspan, with that strength, with that speed and athleticism, he does a great job of rotating down to the rim to help his teammates out whenever they get beaten. So Tari Eason is a great defender, and I think he has tremendous upside on the defensive side of the ball. And now we discuss Jabari Smith Jr. And just like Tari Eason is just a freak of nature when it comes to his size and his length. Now Jabari Smith, he's a little bit taller than Tari Eason. Jabari Smith Jr. stands at 6'10", 220 pounds, and he has a 7'1" wingspan. So there's so many things that pops out about Jabari Smith. So it's kind of hard when you're talking about him what you want to focus on, because he does bring a lot to the game. He was the number 3 overall pick in the 2022 NBA draft. Some people love that he's 6'10" and he can shoot the blood out of the basketball, which is understandable, and sometimes that can overshadow his defense. But he was a monster on the defensive side of the ball coming out of Auburn, and he has potential in this NBA. He has potential in the NBA to be a guy that can say, I can guard 1 through 5. Even last season, the Houston Rockets, they had times where they did throw out a lineup and he was the biggest guy on the court playing the center position, and I think he did a great job rebounding the basketball towards the latter end of the season for the Houston Rockets. But Jabari Smith, he's a guy who's just athletic. For his size at 6'10", we don't see many guys being able to guard the point guard position, but he has that ability. He has the lateral quickness. He can switch anywhere, and he's just a great matchup on the defensive side of the ball. And also, just like Tari Eason, he's another guy that's active as a help defender, whether it's rotating up to get a steal in the passing lanes or rotating down to protect the rim. So I love Jabari Smith Jr., just another big versatile versatile guy that can guard multiple positions for the Houston Rockets. And we've already named Dillon Brooks, Tari, Eason, and Jabari Smith Jr. And we still got 3 guys to talk about that's going to have an impact on the defensive side of the ball. The Houston Rockets, you guys are very, very blessed, man. But the next guy is the 4th overall pick in this year's NBA draft, Amen Thompson. And we saw it from the little bit of action we got from him in the summer league that he's definitely going to have a defensive presence on the court for the Houston Rockets this upcoming season. And just like the last 2 guys, or the last 3 guys that we talked about, the main word here is just, or I should say the main words is just size, athleticism, and versatility. Amen Thompson, a very oversized point guard. He's 6'7", 7-foot wingspan, and he weighs over 200 pounds. And in the overtime elite league, he was everywhere on the defensive side of the ball, guarding guys with the basketball in their hands, and also staying engaged as a help defender. And I think that's what's going to make the Houston Rockets so dangerous, that all of these guys, they don't stop playing defense when they see that their man does not have the ball anymore. They're always looking to help in the passing lanes or rotating down to protect the rim. And if I remember correctly, Amen Thompson, he had a few strips at the rim on bigger players, and I believe he also blocked a dunk attempt, if I'm not wrong. But just can do everything on the defensive side of the ball, beat his man to the spot, pick up full court, protect the rim, rebound the basketball. So the Houston Rockets, they got another guy in Amen Thompson with size that can defend multiple positions. We look at Cam Whitmore. He plays with such high energy. He's such a competitive player, and I think we already see that chip on his shoulder from dropping from a lottery pick to the 20th overall pick. You could tell he's hungry. But he had a game in the summer league where he had 26 points, and he had, I believe, a double-double with 10 steals. So he was like that in college, just playing with a high level on a high energy level on the defensive side of the ball, getting steals and getting blocks. And then of course he's athletic, he's strong, so you can also throw him on different defenders. And then we have Fred VanVleet, who's also he's played for the Toronto Raptors. They won a championship, and their motto for their championship roster, their identity was defense. So he has a defensive mind as well, and he's not gifted with the size and athleticism as these other guys, but he's smart, he plays with heart, and he's like a pest. He's like a little pit bull, like Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry. Very irritant, very strong, man. Those shorter guys, they be very hard to move. They got a good center of gravity. And then also Fred VanVleet, he's another guy that gets steals, picking guys' pockets in the passing lanes. He also has quick hands, so he's getting a lot of strips, poking a lot of balls loose. So it's going to be interesting to see what Coach Ime Udoka, some lineups he could throw out. I would think it would be crazy to see Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Dillon Brooks, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith. I think that would be a fun lineup to watch on both the offensive and the defensive side of the ball. But I just wanted to talk about how disgusting, how scary this defense is going to be going into next season. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below if you agree or disagree, and then subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man, and that's curtains.